Hi everyone and welcome to the kitchen. So a couple of weeks back, me and my friend went out for a farmer's market. If you know, in Dubai, this is the ripe market, maybe targeted towards expats. However, you can find some fresh produce there, and if you're on the lookout for something that you were not able to find in stores like in Carrefour, then maybe you should probably check them out. Also, they have really fun activities around the day, so if you're planning your weekend, go check them out. It costs 5 dirham to enter. And me in particular, I was mostly focused on finding some beetroots, or should I say beets, with the roots and with the stems themselves, with the greens, because I wanted to cook them all up. I wanted to have one dish that contained both. This is why we are starting with some roasted beets. This is a great way to cook the whole plant. The stems are going to go into the sauce, and they're going to make just a perfect companion to the root of the vegetable, to the beetroot. And if you've never liked beetroots, you can actually try this out, and I swear you will find some other dimension to the taste of the beetroot. I also added some onions and some sweet potatoes into the mix, but they're absolutely optional. You may avoid using them altogether. And for spicing everything up, we are going to use some oregano. You can use dried oregano, or you can use the liquid oregano. And when you use dried oregano, of course, you add it a little bit earlier in the cooking, so it has time to soak up some liquid and unfold in flavor. But I'm using liquid oregano, so I added it right in the very end of cooking. We are also going to need some balsamic vinegar. It's going to add some flavor. You might be allergic to balsamic vinegar. If you're allergic to red wine, be careful with that. And also you can add some date syrup. It's going to help the sauce to thicken up a little bit, and also it will create this nice balance between the sour of the balsamic vinegar and the sweet. And as usual, we are starting with washing everything and prepping the vegetables in batches, in the order that they're going to, or I would say in the batches that they're going to go into the cooking process together. So we start with the beetroots, with the beets, and we separate the stems from the beetroot itself. It's very important to wash the beetroot before you cook it, because it can have a lot of dirt and sand on it, and you just chop off any rough parts that you don't like, but you keep the skin on. I quartered the beets, but you can also have the whole vegetable in the oven, and then you can quarter them and take the skin off right after you finished cooking. While we take the skin off, it still might have some sand, so it will be crispy on your teeth. This is not what you want with the beetroot. After we have sliced up the beetroot, you also want to slice up the onions. Try to not make the pieces too small, otherwise they will burn in the oven while the beetroot will be still cooking up. Beetroots are actually quite firm, so beware of how you chop up other vegetables. It's going to be maybe trial and error, but try to make the pieces of approximately the same sizes. Now it's time for the sweet potatoes. They are not part of the original recipe. They are very much optional, but I just like the idea of adding something sweet to the beets. So there you have it. We have some sweet potatoes. I peeled the skin off. You can actually eat it, and I do enjoy eating it. However, the skin didn't look too good to me, so I peeled it off. I didn't get it in the farmer's market, by the way. I did it got it from the store. And these potatoes, the Japanese sweet potatoes, were not as fresh as everything I got from the farmer's market. Now it's time to add everything into the baking sheet. You want to preheat your oven. I think it's 400 degrees Fahrenheit or 200 degrees Celsius, gas mark 6. So be ready with that. And you want to line the sheet, maybe with the baking sheet with the silicone mat, or with the foil, as I do it here. The benefit of using the foil in this recipe is that you can cover the beetroots or the veggies with the foil and clip it, which, as you see, we're going to do next. think of this ahead of time. And we do it because we don't add any oil into the veggies, and we allow the juices to steam up and to cook the vegetable from the inside. Cooking can take up to 30 minutes, but I prefer to check on them maybe half time when they're done, like after 15 minutes, to see if something is burning. Maybe I need to take something off. It's not very good when you open the cover so the steam goes out. That's not what you really want, but if you're concerned about whether or not the vegetables are being cooked properly, you might want to check it. After 30 minutes, you can fork it with a fork and see if it goes in smoothly and goes out smoothly, and this will indicate that the vegetable is cooked properly. And now it's sauce time. The first thing that we do is we chop up the stems, the leaves of the beet in smaller pieces, because what we want is we want to have them easily chewable, we want to have them easily accessible, and basically we want to eat them without thinking that we are eating some really big pieces. And also it's going to go on top of the beetroot, so you want to have like a nice consistency. We start with heating up the pan. It shouldn't be too deep of a pan, but this is one of the two. One thing that I have is a pan, another thing that I have is a wok. So that's the only one I have. But we start with warming up 60 milliliters of water and bring it to the boil. Once the water is boiling, you can add your greens, your chopped beet greens into the water. You will start seeing the water turning purple, which I find really pretty. And after this, you can start adding balsamic vinegar when you reduce the heat to medium. There is about 120 milliliters of balsamic vinegar. This would be also the time when you add date syrup, but I just didn't add mine. And what we do, we start cooking it on medium to high heat so the vinegar can evaporate and kind of thicken. If you add date syrup or date sugar, it's going to thicken even more. But here what I'm doing is I'm just trying to evaporate the excess liquid. And the balsamic vinegar is going to add this extra dimension of flavor. Really, really nice. I absolutely love balsamic vinegar, although I'm a little bit allergic to it. This is what I discovered lately. And yeah, it took me about 15 minutes to evaporate the excess liquid from the sauce. And at the same time, I'm checking if the vegetables are half cooked, if they're cooked, and I'm just forking them to make sure that I'm not overcooking or undercooking them. And once they're cooked, you can remove them from the oven. And your next target is to peel the skin off the beetroot, because as I said, it can get sandy in your mouth once you eat the beetroot with the skin that's not been peeled. So just do that ahead of time once it's cooled down. And we are ready to serve. I'm putting everything into a big bowl and I'm adding this sauce on top. Balsamic vinegar really does make all the vegetables stand out. It makes the taste brighter, more bold. And here is where I'm adding my liquid oregano. I didn't add it in the beginning because it's quite flavorful already, so I don't need it to be as cooked. It just brings out even more flavor. And here we have the roasted beetroots, the roasted veggies with the beetroot, and it tastes phenomenal. And now we have here cruciferous, oh my god, cruciferous vegetable soup. Kale soup with sweet potatoes and with beans. As you know, I really enjoy having some cruciferous vegetables in my diet. Kale is one of them. I do not always juice it, or I do not prefer to juice it actually, but I do like the variety of cruciferous vegetables, the things that they bring when you include them into your diet with all their anti-inflammatory and anti-aging properties apparently. I do appreciate the variety not only in the cruciferous vegetables themselves, but also in the way that they can be cooked. And cooking cruciferous vegetables has some advantages over eating raw cruciferous vegetables. Some of the compounds in raw cruciferous vegetables can actually compete with iodine availability in your body, which is important for your thyroid. So cooking cruciferous vegetables versus consuming them in juices or in a raw form has this very important advantage. Here, of course, I'm adding some white beans, which are just another source of protein, and the sweet potatoes. I just love the sweet potatoes. Apart from these main ingredients, we'll have some aromatics, some onions, some garlic, some spices, and I'm actually going to be using the veggie broth, which I'll link somewhere up here, that we cooked in one of the previous videos. I have it in a frozen form, so if you're curious of how it's going to go, you're up for a treat. It took some time to melt it. And we are starting with mincing some onion and some garlic. They will be the first ones to go onto the pan. This is the first bunch of our veggies of our aromatics. I just put it aside in one bowl so I can throw them into the pan all at once. Now it's sweet potatoes time, and I'm just peeling them off because I didn't like how the skin looked. You can keep the skin on. I eat the skin. Then I just chop them up into the half circles, or better say slice them up. And this is irrelevant to the whole recipe thing, but I just like how the half circles look like on a plate. And the potatoes are going to go onto the pan with 2 bay leaves, 1/4 of a teaspoon of chili flakes, or more if you like chili flakes. It's time to prep the kale. Of course, you wash it, you observe it, you look if there are any insects inside, you want to remove those, and then it's time to chop the kale into biteable pieces, into spoonable pieces, something that you can eat with the spoon. And if you like some parsley or coriander, this is the time to chop it up. I put parsley into a separate bowl and I added 2 tablespoons of nutritional yeast. You can also avoid it, but it will give like a little bit of a nutty, cheesier flavor to the whole thing. If you don't have it, don't bother yourself too much. You can get it anytime you want, and the recipe will be perfectly fine without it. We set them aside and they're going to go together into the pot. Let's set some miso paste aside. You can set it aside into a bowl because later you're going to mix it with the broth to add into the soup. Miso has a lot of health advantages. It's high in magnesium, vitamin K, copper, as well as zinc. And the last ingredient, of course, is some white beans. I pre-cooked them, so I soaked them overnight and cooked them in an instant pot. You can leave them slightly undercooked because they're still going to go in the soup and they're going to cook for around 30 minutes. Here I'm using around 250-300 grams of cooked white beans. If you're using the canned beans, it's going to be approximately 1 can. And it's actually cooking time, so we are starting with melting some broth cubes. You can just add broth, whichever you have, around 250 milliliters maybe, or something to put on a pan because later you would add the aromatics in there. And here you see me just melting the broth. It took some time. I covered it with the lid so the water does not evaporate. And we add the first batch into the simmering broth and let them cook for around 5 minutes so they release their flavor and all the goodness from the onions and from the garlic. And now it's time for batch number 2. We are adding sweet potatoes, kale goes in here as well, together with the bay leaf and together with chili flakes. All goes in one pot. And we add more broth in there. It's around 5 cups or 1.2 liters of broth, or water if you don't have broth. We bring it to the boil, then add the beans, reduce the heat to medium and let the vegetables cook for about 20 to 30 minutes. And we're about to finish the cooking. We take our miso paste, add it to the bowl, add a little bit of broth, and then add it back in. After which it's time for parsley and nutritional yeast to go in. And there you have it. It's time to serve it. If you want, you can add a little bit more salt. It tastes amazing with white bread or a little bit of additional sweet potatoes on top. It's just perfect. And there you have it, 2 beautiful recipes that I got you from the farmer's market. One is beets, another one is kale soup. Let me know what you think. Do you actually like beets? Have you ever tried them? If you can, remember to eat some greens today and know what you eat. This is so important. Of course, I will appreciate your feedback as a comment or a like to this video. If you're not subscribed yet, you're very much welcome to subscribe, and I see you next week.